In order for sketches to completely maintain their shape and produce 100% predictable results, all of the sketch entities need to be fully defined using dimensions and constraints. In order for a sketch to be properly defined, there must be a strategy in place for how the entities relate to one another. This is known as the sketch's design intent. Fusion 360 does not require sketches to be fully constrained, but it's a good practice to follow. The design intent for this sketch profile is to keep all of the sketch entities symmetric about this angled construction line. This means I'll set dimensions equal to one another on either side of the line, and some sketch entities will be mirrored across the line. First, I'd like to copy these 3 circles to the other side of the angled construction line using the mirror command. I'll select all 3 circles, then add the construction line as the mirror line, and they're added to the other side. These circles aren't currently centered between the outer edges because the construction line is not centered. I'll dimension the construction line later to clean up the position. It's best practice to add constraints to a sketch before applying dimensions, forcing the sketch elements into the desired position before setting the size. First, I'll add constraints to these 3 circles. I want them to be equally spaced, so I'll add a midpoint constraint between the middle circle's center point and the horizontal construction line. Now, to center the circles between the 2 outer edges of the profile, I'll apply the midpoint constraint to the same center point and the vertical construction line. Now, I'll make all 3 circles equal size. I'll select the left and center circle and the right and center circle. Now these circles will remain centered between the outer edges, will be spaced apart evenly along the construction line, and will remain equal in size. The mirrored circles on the other side of the angled line also reflect these constraints. Now that the constraints have been added, I'll move on to adding dimensions to the sketch. I'll enable the command from the marking menu, and the first dimension I'll add is a baseline dimension used as a reference for other dimensions. I'll dimension this bottom edge as the baseline dimension, set to 100 millimeters. Notice that the line on the right turned black when the dimension was added. This is because its position is defined. However, its length still needs to be specified, which I'll set as the same length as the bottom edge to maintain symmetry. Either an equal constraint could be applied, or a dimension could be used. I'll dimension this line and create a reference to the baseline dimension by clicking on it and then hitting Enter. Next, I'll add a baseline dimension to the width of the sketch at the bottom. I'll select the 2 outer lines and enter a value of 18 millimeters. Using this as a baseline, I'll dimension the other side of the sketch and reference back to the baseline dimension. Now the 2 inner lines of the profile are shown in black since their positions are fully defined. The angled lines on the ends are still shown in blue, indicating that they are underdefined. All that's needed to define each one is to dimension either the length of the line or its angle. I'll dimension the angle from the bottom edge in this case and set it to 60 degrees. Now all these line segments at this corner are fully defined, as shown in black. I'll dimension the same angle at the top of the profile and create a reference to the first angle to maintain symmetry. To center the mirrored circles at the top, I'll dimension the angled construction line. I'll select this line in the bottom edge and set the angle to 45 degrees. At this point, most of the sketch is shown in black. However, there are a few entities shown in blue. If you are ever unsure how to finish fully defining your sketch, simply drag the blue sketch element or an endpoint to see how it's free to move. For instance, if I drag the arc, its radius is able to change. To fully define this arc, I can dimension its radius. And I'll enter a value of 30 millimeters. The only sketch entities still shown in blue are the three circles. There are 3 dimensions that need to be added to fully define them. First, I'll dimension the diameter of one circle and set it to 8 millimeters. This causes all of the circles to update to the same size. Next, I'll define the spacing between them. To do this, I can simply dimension the length of the horizontal construction line and give it a value of 30 millimeters. The final dimension will position the circles in the horizontal direction. The design intent for these circles is to keep the position of the center circle at 40% of the length of the bottom edge, which requires an equation. To create this dimension, I'll select the origin, then the vertical construction line. To create the equation, I'll reference the baseline dimension, then type times 0.4 to make it 40% of the total length, and hit enter. This dimension updates with the equation symbol and will always remain at a position 40% along the edge. Now the entire sketch is fully defined. All of the sketch entities appear in black, indicating that they are fixed in place. Based on the design intent of your sketch, making modifications to specific dimensions can be powerful and allow for instant updates. Because many of these dimensions were derived from baseline dimensions, such as the 100 millimeter dimension for the bottom edge, they can be updated and all associated dimensions will change with them. If I go ahead and change baseline dimension to 125 millimeters, the sketch updates instantly. The 2 outer edges increase in length, and the position of the circles remains at 40% of the bottom edge. At the same time, the entire sketch remained fully defined and maintains its symmetry on the other side of the construction line. Fully defining sketches in terms of the model's design intent is extremely powerful and allows you to update the model with simple changes. This will create a robust model that can be easily adjusted at any time.